Hey guys, it's Eddie here from the Action Figure Blues podcast, coming in with another video supplemental. So this is the one I have been building to something that is very much a passion project of mine. For those who don't regularly listen to the Action Figure Blues podcast, I am a massive Deadpool fan. Deadpool is my go-to character of choice. It's often hard these days to talk about him without kind of sounding a bit like that old hipster joke of I was into him before he was cool, because today he's an extremely popular character. It's actually quite shocking to me how big he has become. But for me, it started around 97. I was 11 years old. And we used to get our comics here in Australia a couple of months after their sort of initial release in the US. So I believe it was around January 97. Was at the newsagents at High Point Shopping Centre, and I came across an issue of Deadpool #1 by Joe Kelly and Ed McGuinness. Now, I was a bit of an idiot. I thought that the number in the top corner of the comic meant the order that it came off the printing press, and not necessarily the issue publishing order. So I thought I'd found the very first copy of that comic to be printed, and other ones would have 2, 3, 4 going onwards, because most of the comics we had back then were in sort of the 300s, 400s, and I just thought that was because we lived in Australia and people told the difference of comics issues depending on what the picture on the cover was. Wasn't until years later I learned that was the issue order. But I was excited. I thought I had a special issue, so I picked it up even though I knew nothing about the character, and instantly fell in love. And that led me to a lot of back issue diving, which I'm glad I did then, because the early issues of Deadpool by Rob Liefeld and that sort of New Mutants X-Force era, I was able to get quite cheap then in the 90s, but they go for a pretty penny now. So glad I did that when I could. And of course, being an action figure lover, I of course picked up the Toy Biz Deadpool action figures. But my favorite action figure line sort of constantly over the years has been Marvel Legends. I've been collecting it since that line began in 2002. And I was always excited whenever a Deadpool figure got released. So that's the theme of this episode. Long way about. Let's have a retrospective look at Deadpool in Marvel Legend form. So the very first Deadpool Marvel Legends figure comes from Wave 6 of the Toy Biz era. It's the only Deadpool we get during the Toy Biz wave. He was extremely popular. In fact, Wave 6 itself was very popular, and one that a lot of expensive figures come from. We were quite lucky here in Australia. We had a deluge of this wave, so you could actually pick a lot of these guys up for extremely cheap prices. I only paid $13 Australian for my Deadpool, which was very cheap even for back then. And some of them I even got for around like $4, $6 later on once they hit clearance. But this guy was super articulated, even for a Marvel Legends back in the day. So he was a great one. And if you can believe it, he was also short packed in the wave. And if you went back to action figure boards at the time, a lot of people were complaining about this character because they thought he was a weird, obscure choice, and why they're making him when there's so many other characters that we haven't received or gotten yet in figure form. So it's very different to the way that the character's perceived today. He also came packed with Dupe, who I don't have pictured here. But that was an odd choice. The characters actually hadn't crossed paths in the comics up until that time. They were just looking to add something a little bit extra and zany into this pack, I guess, to try and get people to buy this obscure character of Deadpool. So next we have the 2-pack, which came from what's often considered to be the dark period for Marvel Legends, the early years of Hasbro taking over the line. So this figure uses the Bullseye from Toy Biz Buck, and he was packaged with a Warpath figure. Very popular at the time. And is a 2-pack that goes for still considerable amounts on the secondary market, mainly for Warpath these days. But back in the day, this was when Deadpool was gaining popularity. And you can see in this image he's got his Techno vest on, which comes from the Cable Deadpool era, which is where Deadpool really started to spring into becoming from cult favourite to a much more popular character. And this is where we get a lot of the Deadpool we know today. Chimichanga and Hydra Bob, for example, come from this run. Now, this guy does have a lot of knockoffs around. So if you look carefully on his gun there, he has a Deadpool symbol. That is a great, quick, easy way to tell if you have a knockoff without standing them side by side. It is hard to tell. I do have an image here of the real one that has the Deadpool symbol next to one that doesn't, which is a knockoff figure. Now, the gun that this Deadpool's holding isn't actually a knockoff gun. I think this comes from a Nick Fury figure. I've gotten rid of the knockoff gun, but the knockoff gun doesn't have that Deadpool symbol on it. And, of course, this 2-pack also came with a variant of Deadpool featuring his colours from the X-Men issue of Cable and Deadpool. Next, after the 2-packs, we have the Rebirth era for Marvel Legends, in where we got a repaint of the 2-pack Deadpool in his X-Force colours, which I believe that comic was still going at the time and was extremely popular. And has become sort of the default Ultra Magnus repaint of any Deadpool collectible now, is you need to get him in his grey X-Force uniform. There was an alternate version of this guy that was just the red Deadpool, pretty much similar to the one you got in the 2-pack, but it was released on the single Epic Heroes card, which I believe was only available in the UK. So I don't actually have one. He's so similar to the 2-pack one, and I am a package river, so never picked him up. Then we come to 2016, which was a very important year for Deadpool in Marvel Legends. It's been a few years since he'd gotten a figure, and his popularity had really shot through the roof by this time. This was the year his first movie with Ryan Reynolds came out, and from here on out he's going to be largely a household name and controversial when talking to some older comic book fans. I would say that as a 2016 Deadpool became an A-lister when talking about Marvel Comics characters, which is very odd for some old folks to hear. Sorry, Ben. And this figure that came out with the Juggernaut wave was immensely popular. People were going insane trying to get their hands on this action figure, and it's no wonder why. He is a fantastic representation of the Merc with a mouth. The funny thing is, though, this guy was so popular, Hasbro actually released cases of this Deadpool figure by himself after the fact. So not only did you have a lot of people buying up the Juggernaut wave version of this guy, but comic book stores in particular could just order cases of these figures. And what I actually saw a lot of smart comic book stores doing is they didn't sort of pack an end cap with this guy. They would just sort of put one on the shelf periodically, and people would think that they were stumbling across a kind of rare popular figure and were buying this guy up like crazy. So I would actually venture a guess to say that this figure is going to be the most common Deadpool figure out on the market. It came in a time period where now Marvel Legends is booming. It's one of the main action figure lines, unlike previous years. There's a lot of figures being produced, and the fact that this guy just got cases and cases of figures produced, I would venture a guess to, say he's easily the most common Deadpool figure out there in people's collections, but arguably probably the most common Marvel Legend figure created. Maybe a couple of Caps and Iron Mans in heavily retail ordered waves and such, but for a single figure, this guy's got to be up there. And he came in a couple of different versions, so you can see he also had multiple heads that came with this guy. And he also includes a taco in his pack, which, hey, Deadpool likes Mexican food. It's a great ongoing joke that everyone seems to know and is on every t-shirt, so why not chuck a taco in there? And the reason this guy is often referred to as Taco Deadpool. Now, this is where I do get a little bit lost in my timeline, so a couple of these figures coming up, you might be able to swap back and forth depending on their release and also what time we were able to get them here in Australia. But I believe that the Venom symbiote Deadpool back in black was the next one released. He was a GameStop exclusive, I believe, in the States, or EB Games here in Australia. And he was great. He came with sort of two figures you could create out of him, so naturally I had to buy both versions. You got sort of a base version, I should say, and a Venomized version. So he is based on the Colin Bunn mini-series, which is very loose about whether or not it's in canon, but was sort of the first Deadpool with a symbiote on him version that was created. Technically, he wore the suit before Spider-Man, according to the Secret Wars story. But whether it's canon or not is a bit loose. So technically, an alternate universe version of Wade Wilson, which is how he made it onto this list here, where I'm covering just the Wade Wilson figures. But definitely a bit of an odd choice looking back now to get this guy so early on. Now, this guy is a very special Deadpool figure. We talked about probably the most common one just two back. This guy's, I would venture to be arguably the most rare Deadpool figure, which may surprise some people. And some people are like, oh no, he's common. I saw him around a fair bit. But this isn't the regular retail release of an X-Force Deadpool. This is the HasCon release. So the shade of grey used on him is slightly different from the retail one I'll talk about in a sec. But probably the main change is his accessories that he comes with. Notably, the black bazooka with the boom Deadpool symbol on it. And he's got his kind of more classic red and black colouring on his laser gun. But this guy was used for a Hasbro convention. That was something they were trying to kick off a couple of years ago, and I was lucky enough to pick him up without paying triple digits. I did pay in the high double digits for him. I haven't looked at what he goes for these days, but I do believe he was available on an early version of the Hasbro Pulse, so it's not like the most rarest action figures of all time, but when it comes to your Deadpool collection, this guy's going to be rarer than on the common side. So this is the version that most people will know. He was released in the Sasquatch Build-A-Figure wave and is Deadpool using a more updated buck, very similar to the Taco Deadpool, to display the X-Force uniform. So he is slightly different to the version released at HasCon. He doesn't come with the multiple heads or the boom accessories. So you can find versions where people have put on a Taco Deadpool head. But they are actually slightly different. The Taco Deadpool head doesn't have the bags around the eyes, so it is something you want to look at carefully, as well as the shades of grey when you're trying to decide whether or not you're picking up a retail release or a Hascon release. Now, also in that Sasquatch wave was the first appearance, Deadpool. Not quite how he looked during his first appearance. Fairly close, but to me, this guy is far more based off his 90s Toy Biz counterpart, down to the Shrinky Dink swords that he comes with. And as someone who played with that 90s Deadpool Toy Biz figure with kind of the carver knife there, I absolutely love this guy. He's a personal favourite of mine. Okay, here's where we're getting Deadpool's thick and fast. So this is Deadpool in his X-Men uniform from the Daniel Way run. Now, I often hear this guy referred to as the trainee Deadpool because he wears something similar to it in Deadpool 2. But no, this one comes straight from the comics. Speaking of the comics, he also comes with a Madcap head, who was a character who was stuck inside Deadpool's head for a period of time and retroactively used to explain some of the thought boxes during Daniel's Way 1. So technically, retroactively, it does suit with this figure. It is a bit odd of an extra head choice, but hey, it's probably a figure they wouldn't have made otherwise. And in this Sauron wave, along with the X-Men uniform, we also get Deadpool without pants because, hey, it's funny, it's Deadpool, and actually some well sculpted slippers on there too. And my favourite of this wave comes with Wanda Wilson, who is a female version of Deadpool. So it's nice getting a bit of a different sculpt going on here for this figure than the Bucky sculpt we've seen over the course of a lot of these guys. And she, of course, came with the Headpool figure, which is basically zombie Deadpool with a little flying top hat, which is nice from the Merc with a Mouth run. Okay, this is where I do start to lose track of which Deadpool came where. I believe the next one is the legendary Riders Deadpool that features him on his red scooter. Another thing people often attribute to Deadpool 2, but does come from the comics, in particular the Gail Simone run. So credit where credit's due there. His little Vespa is an iconic vehicle for him, and she's the one that created it. We also see the return of the Technovest, indicating that this is kind of a Cable Deadpool era version of Wade, but he wasn't the only Deadpool in this set. We also have Squirrel Paul as well as Dog Paul. Following that, we have the Miami Vice themed set featuring Deadpool in an all-white suit. Now, this is one I do have a bit of a nitpick with because you had during the Jerry Duggan run when Deadpool becomes extremely rich, he's wearing a black suit with a red tie. So I kind of would have preferred that, harkening back to an actual comic book style version of Deadpool than this kind of white suit look. But hey, it's a fun figure. Lots of cool accessories and whatnot that he comes with, sort of colourful guitar and a Hit Monkey figure. But yeah, sort of wish it was more comic book based. This set does also include another Headpool that's riding around in a remote control car, very similar to Silvermane from the Superior Foes of Spider-Man. Lastly, we have the convention exclusive 80th anniversary retro Deadpool that came on sort of the Toy Biz style cards. Now, his black parts have been given sort of a shiny blue look, which is often a colour used to denote black highlights in comics, and I absolutely love this guy. It's hard to say because he is so new, but he's arguably my favourite Deadpool figure we've gotten since my love of Deadpool comes from the 90s, and this guy is just dripping with it. So much so, I did have to buy multiple of him so I can have both the pack, and here he is next to my own childhood Deadpool figure. So there we have it, guys. That is a look at Deadpool over the course of Marvel Legends. Now, there is the new Pirate Deadpool and a new X-Men Deadpool on its way to us shortly, but I don't have them in hands yet, even though some people do, and I'm sure it won't be long till we have enough for a volume 2 of this look. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for letting me talk about my favourite character of Deadpool for what I want it to be a short one. It's looking to be over 20 minutes at this point. So if you are hearing this, thank you. Thank you for being with me so long. So I'm going to sign off now. I've been Eddie Edmonds, one of the biggest Deadpool fans going around. You can catch me, as well as a far more talented action figure reviewers than I, over on the Action Figure Blues podcast. And you can always hit me up. Let me know what I've done right, what I've done wrong. Have I missed anything? Have I somehow forgotten your favourite Deadpool action figure? I know I didn't talk about things such as the 12-inch figures and whatnot. But hey, I'm a 6-inch guy. But yes, you can hit me up over at Twitter at Eddie3429. Same with Instagram as well. So I'm going to sign off, and remember, potato cakes are best served cold.